Hello and welcome to the Hangout. I'm joined now by Subir Gokarn of Brookings India and also Chitra Subramaniam, journalist from Bangalore. Subir is in Delhi. Narendra Modi has begun outlining his economic outline, and perhaps blueprint is a slightly early phrase to use. What we are trying to understand is the aggregation of all the terms that he used yesterday. Does that mean that, does this sort of form into a cogent economic policy, number one? Number two, is this what the country really needs were the BJP to come into power and Narendra Modi come in as Prime Minister? And number three, is this what is this something that's going to sustain in the long term in terms of what needs to be done as economic policy? So, Subir, let me begin with you. So, we've got, I think, a smattering of 6 or 7 points that we could pick up from Mr. Modi's statements yesterday across several gatherings, right, including one to India Inc. and one to a group of traders. So, he seemed to address every constituency, look at everyone's concerns, but are you getting a sense that this is coming together as a policy to address some of the crucial concerns that we are facing as an economy today?
Well, I think I would look at it in terms of three levels, and this is basically vision, strategy, and execution. I thought the speech, I did not hear the first two, the traders and the accountants, but that was the one given to the business community. And I thought, as a vision statement, it was very comprehensive. It addressed all the press points increased high in the economy, and perhaps there wasn't too much attempt to prioritize. There are lots of stress points, some are urgent and pressing than others, but the speech provided some reference, to all of them. It then went straight to the execution sphere, which basically means that Mr. Modi was putting across the message that execution or governance is more important than policy. Whatever the policy may be, it's important to execute, and that's a reasonable message, reasonable position on which to run the campaign. But what was missing in between, I thought, was strategy. What are the concrete steps that need to be taken to address the stress points? So, when I look at the speech in terms of needing to provide some clarity of the party's position on these three levels, I thought we got reasonable clarity in the first level, strong message, commitment on the third level, but not too much content on the second level, that is of strategy.
Subir, I'm going to come back to you in a second and really ask you about what you think should have been the key points that this could have addressed or raised given the kind of challenges we're facing at this point of time, and those are many. Chitra, let me get you in on your first layer of sort of views or inputs on what you took away from Narendra Modi's statements across, made at various points yesterday.
For me, there were several things that crossed my mind, but and then I also watched the commentary across, and I'm just coming into this now as a journalist, coming back, and the one thing that struck me was that it was more of an enabling speech, an enabling vision, and not a providing vision, because that's a huge difference. I think for me it was that there was a sense of coming together to enable the country to go forward, as opposed to saying we will subsidize this, we'll subsidize that, which is all motherhood and apple cart, because at the end of the day, who's going to pay? So I agree that the dots have to be filled. I thought that the first big statement was there. It was a direction. I wasn't expecting the nuts and bolts, because that's too early. And the scale of India, when you look at 1.2 billion, it's almost impossible to start getting nuts and bolts at this level.
Chitra, let me come back to you. Subir, if I were to ask you, what are the three most critical issues on the internal and external front that you think any Prime Minister candidate should be talking about?
Well, I think we have to be very clear about the time horizon. The new government, whoever forms it, is going to come into office in a situation of great macroeconomic fragility. We may not want to draw comparisons between 2014 and 1991 in terms of the intensity of the crisis, but we are in a fragile situation. We are fragile on the internal front vis-a-vis inflation, vis-a-vis the fiscal situation, and obviously all of this translating into low investment. We are fragile on the external front. We are deficit and investing confidence. So all of these are issues that new government has a plan to deal with as soon as it hits the ground. We can't wait for a month or 2 months or 3 months for the approaches to these problems to be sorted out, because I don't think the investor community, either global or domestic, is going to give the government much of a chance. So it's important to have a plan to address the macro situation. Obviously, not only a solution to that, but it has to be a coherent plan, a credible plan to address these 4 or 5 pressure points in the macro. Beyond that, the longer term issues seem to relate. Food inflation is a horrendous source of stress on the economy. It is doing all kinds of damage to everything. And unless we get to grips with it, we get back on track for any kind of acceleration. Infrastructure, the model PPP is now basically broken. I know Mr. Modi addressed the infrastructure, but I think we have to have some thinking on how we reorient the model, redefine the private sector and the public sector, putting new infrastructure investment and effectively on the ground. And the third one, I would say, is employment. Again, many references to employment and productivity and so on. But the challenge is humongous. We're talking about 10 million jobs a year, a month for the next 20 years. We need to see some very, very concrete actions, particularly on getting workers out of agriculture. So strategy, we've been talking about labor reform for 22 years. Nothing's happened. Dynamics have changed. But there are some huge opportunities in manufacturing. Given China's medium-term prospects of wage competitiveness, I think we are in a position to take advantage of that. But we need to get our labor markets and infrastructure in order to take advantage of it. These are, I think, 3 both short-term and long-term considerations that we dealt with very quickly, at least credible strategy on this.
Chitra, how would you see, if I would ask you what in your mind are the 3 most important economic issues that people would vote on, or let's say you would vote on in this election, what would they be?
For me, it would be job creation. We need to create about 12 million new jobs every year on year. It would be open up the internal markets, open up India's markets. Let's take off all the taxes that are coming in the way of Indians enjoying the world's largest market domestically, and externally. I think for me, I'm being careful. I'm trying to look for a word, but I think comparing ourselves to China is quite silly, because we are not even. I think we are below. We account for less than 3%. If not less than that, of global trade, and China is pushing 13%. I think we've got to be careful, and for me it would be jobs, creation of jobs. Secondly, public health and education. Those issues have to come up, because a country's growth also depends on how much you consume in terms of electricity, in terms of public health, in terms of education. And finally, I just want to throw in a word of caution about the PPP model. All these models sound very good, but it's not one shoe fits all. We have to try it out. These things have failed and succeeded. So I think we need a very serious conversation about building the economy around some very solid platforms, instead of just importing or exporting concepts or comparing ourselves with countries which have very different economic models.
Okay, so Subir, let me. I'm tempted to sort of stir a debate on this, but I'll come back to that in a moment. Subir, if we were to look at the way Mr. Modi has been approaching some of these economic issues, would it be fair to say that, rightly or wrongly, he seems to prefer the ground-up approach rather than the top-down approach?
Well, I think his perspective, as he has emphasized in many speeches, including yesterday, is that he comes at it from experience of having been a chief minister. And basically that means a problem-solving, nitty-gritty kind of approach to governance, which is not so caught up in the abstractions and the high-level thinking of level policy or national policy. So this is not a bad thing at all. I think we need a combination. We need a good policy at the macro level. We need something that recognizes the country, the nation, and the aggregate economy, but also accommodates differences between different parts of the country and different sectors. That's at the macro level. But we need from the bottom up, we need the capacity to solve problems, to bang ahead, get things done, to coordinate between disparate interests, and even within government there are disparate interests. So that capacity to bring the strategy and the execution together is something that he's emphasizing based on his experience as chief minister, and that's I think a very legitimate positioning for him to do. This is logical based on his experience, but he's using it. So,
Subir, if I were to take goods and service tax as one illustration, how would you, and the fact that, he brought it up yesterday, but he said that, we were keen on it, but the IT infrastructure was not ready, and obviously the other issue of compensation to different states. Could you, does that tell us anything about his ability to, actually execute? Or is it because GST was obviously something that was being administered by the federal government and maybe the state was not in a mood to comply?
Is that for me?
Subir.
Oh, sorry, I kind of lost some of that question.
Yeah. No, Subir, the question was, if we were to use the goods and service tax as an illustration, he did mention it yesterday, but then was quick to point out that, the IT infrastructure was not ready, which is true, and it was not yet working in their favor, which is, I would imagine, the compensation to different states was a question or a concern, which many other states have expressed as well. So if we were to take this as an illustration, what could we conclude in terms of the desire to achieve some of these objectives that he set out to achieve?
Well, I think I read the position on the GST or the statement of the GST as being essentially in favor of the tax itself, and pointing out in the process that look, it's desirable policy reform, but implementation may be difficult. So let's not forget the implementation aspect. I don't know. I'm not this, but I think if that's the case, that if we agree that it's a good thing to do, then we have to find every possible way to put it in place as quickly as possible, which means addressing. I find the argument that we are incapable of putting an IT infrastructure in place really not very comforting, because we're supposed to be doing all of that for other countries all the time. So I don't think that is an insurmountable issue. What is more difficult is working out the bargain between the center and the states on this. And if he is taking this sort of chief minister-led governance strategy, which is bringing chief ministers onto the platform as equal partners in the process, that clearly should point to a much clear reaching of an arrangement or agreement between the states on this. But bottom line is, we need to demonstrate that everybody benefits from it. Some may benefit more than others, but everybody benefits. I think that analysis and that argument needs to be reinforced and pushed very hard to get states on board. In my own professional perspective, I think the GST is an extremely important reform. It can make a huge difference to our fiscal situation over the medium term, and we should learn very clear lessons from the experience of the VAT, implemented in 2005, as to just how much impact a self-enforcing or self-regulating tax framework can give the country.
Let me take a slightly different tack. Chitra, question to you here. What do you think the incoming Prime Minister should be? As in, we've had two sessions of a technocrat, economist Prime Minister. I don't know if technocrat is the right word, but surely an economist Prime Minister. Given all our problems, and we're now talking about the economic, what is the one trait that you would really look for at this point of time?
to come back to your the earlier questions that were raised yesterday, my question is it fair to expect somebody who runs a state of 60 million people to be able to give answers to scale to 1.2 billion? I'll just give you a small example from Europe. I mean, who are the heavy hitters in Europe? It's Germany and France, and maybe the Scandinavians. So you are having a situation in a very educated situation where you can say, okay, Angela Merkel, she doesn't know this, she doesn't know that, but there is a certain economic direction. So to come back to your question, I think the one quality I would look at in any prime minister, whoever that is to stop talking, get your hands dirty, and get on with the show, because that's what India needs. I think we've had enough of theories, had enough of experts telling us what to do. Now we just simply need to become workers. So yes, I don't think that you have to be an economist or a doctor or whatever. I think you've got to be somebody who knows how to govern, who knows how to administer, who knows how to build communities, who knows how to trust people. That's what India needs. It doesn't need a specialist at this moment. I don't think so. It needs somebody who can rally around the country and go forward, take India forward.
Right, so let me come back to the economic point with you, Subir. One of the points that came up yesterday was trade and traders. And he used an interesting term. I think he said that basically the traders should really talk about attacking rather than being on the defensive, and he used a very interesting term. He said bhagne ka plan na kare, bidne ka plan kare, and traders should see this as an opportunity, which is obviously the explosion of retail, organized retail, e-commerce. He even said that traders should look at setting up virtual malls. In some ways, it's actually pretty futuristic and almost seems like a fantasy when you look at the way trade is organized today. How do you see that stance, Subir? I mean, what does that reflect? Is that a kind of acceptance of the way things are and cannot be changed, or is it being, in some ways, is it a show of bravado?
No, I think we've got to. I will go back to my initial characterization of the speech, which was, vision, strategy, and execution. When we talk about technology as it applies to retail, there is a visionary aspect of this for the simple reason that is how retail is being impacted by technology. It's not something that you can reverse, but there's also a larger context in which this is perceived, which is we want to get our system to become more productive. Productivity is a critical parameter, a critical indicator of how our economy is doing. And if we're not using technology to improve productivity, then we're losing out on an opportunity. So when we look at how retail has developed, the trends in retail, how technology and other services have been brought together, all of this ends up contributing to productivity growth. So I think the debate in retail, which wasn't directly addressed, but obviously it has created some buzz in terms of possible reversals, shouldn't be seen as, FDI is not an end in itself. FDI is a way to bring resources and technology into a sector which can have enormous benefits across the board. And if that's what we're trying to achieve, if that's the goal, then let's work backwards from that goal and look for ways in which to achieve it, instead of getting hung up on whether FDI is good or FDI is not good. So the larger vision here is productivity is the goal, productivity is the end game. You've got to find every possible way, whether it involves domestic resources or foreign resources or organized retail or informal sector or whatever. Bring them all together with a productivity metric. What is good for productivity is something that we should be pursuing. There may be adverse consequences somewhere else. Let's look at those, but let's not reject it unless we are very sure of what impact it's going to have. And going to have positive impact, then I think we should be moving ahead with it.
Okay, we're sort of running out of time. We started with the question saying, is the ModiNomics outline and not blueprint as yet, maybe, high on vision and low on specifics? So, Chitra, let me ask you for your comments as we come to an end. What's your takeaway from this, and what more are you expecting as the election season gathers steam?
There's one thing I would like to outline, that The economy, no economy today is growing in isolation, certainly not one as big as ours. I think it's important for us to have a national discussion on the commitments that India has made at the WTO. All these commitments are kicking in, whether it is services or manufacturing or pharmaceuticals or food or agriculture, and somehow we seem to be having a navel-gazing discussion, running around in circles, wondering what's going on, while we've made huge commitments. So, I would just request platforms such as these to enlarge the scope of of what we're talking, instead of just focusing on one thing, which in any case, none of us control. India is going to vote soon, and we'll find out who India wants.
Chitra, for that. Subir, your last word.
The problems are well known, the priority is well known. I don't think there's too much of political difference on what the problems are and what the solutions are. I think we've got to be just focused, as I said, on converting vision into strategy into execution as seamlessly as possible. And we don't have a lot of time to do it. I think my last word would be, let's not forget that the first 3 months the new government term, if we don't have a concrete economic strategy in place, we could be facing some disturbance.
Right, thank you both Chitra and Subir. It's obviously a very, very tough time. Quick decisions are called for by whoever takes over as the Prime Minister, and the Prime Minister, the consensus seems to be, has to be someone who will roll up his or her sleeves, as the case may be, and take over, and really ensure that implementation is given full priority. Equally, there are internal problems and external problems, but both external and internal deserve very, very sort of tight and close scrutiny, and of course vision, strategy and execution. All three are very critical, and we look forward. Thank you both for joining us on Hangout.
Thank you. Thank you.